So good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for coming to an evening of poetry at the Adrian's Memorial Library. Our tonight's feature is Harvey Sprung, and he's been writing poetry since forever. And he's also a world traveler, so he has a lot of his world experiences interwoven into his poetry. The program will last about an hour and 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up to open mic, and then we'll close out the evening. So thank you so much for joining us this evening, and if you join me in giving Harvey a nice warm Poughkeepsie welcome.
I want to begin with a poem written, surprisingly enough, more than 10 years ago, though I hadn't realized it. Forget me not. The mind moths keep leaving little holes in phrases, in ideas, infested and flustered my doily thoughts, my lattice-framed references, one footnote short of a quotation, leave the feeling of something incomplete, eaten out from within, empty space filled with the fear of all I ever knew, unraveling into lisping whispers of silence. This was written, I can date it. It was revised. Well, it was written in April of '98. This will tell you where the poetry was going away already. Writer's block. There's no news from the front. The same old lines face each other. No movement. No, not forward or back. No new ideas hang tattered from barbed wire, and entropy is defied by fossilization. Each new I am comes forth as spam, lined with cliches that are hated. I try to extrude new rhyme. Nothing comes forth from my mind, which seems to be quite constipated. As I struggle with verse, my dilemma gets worse. All I create seems a bore, just reiteration of imagination that was used up sometime before. Is it so bad to have nothing to say? An encore of the same play that reflects where I still am today, the repetitive squawk of a weathered blue jay. I must stop rhyming this way. Is it okay to acknowledge that I'm almost complete and make sense to myself? There's nothing wrong to journey again to places I have visited before and love, to comment again upon a favorite song, or to pray a prayer again in season. So I acknowledge that this redundancy is just a part of me, and that's enough good reason. And that was written in '98. So getting back to, maybe it's been going on. Anyway, let's get around to living again, okay? Curtain. 6 a.m. I lay half awake in the dark. I hear the random gurgle that rain utters as it descends the metal gutters. I can hear the countdown to the old analog alarm, ticking away dawn, the counterpoint of the rhythms of order and the baseline of chaos. Each dawn, despite apparent sameness, gives birth to children that will grow in ways we cannot know. Not even we, the actors in the show, get to know how to play this improv role into which we are cast. Which line will be our next? Which line will be our last? But now, the curtain rises. Enter right in our disguises. Showtime! Anybody recognize that from a movie? If you do, you know what I'm talking about. Awakening. The 4 a.m. Amtrak earthquakes itself into my dream. Low rumbling, lumbering off and far off thundering shakes me awake into the day. It has nothing to say, but nothing is the same. I toss and turn, but can't return. I can no longer remember the dream from which I came. The doctors who delivered me out of a dream and into an alien day. Had nothing to say. A tired trope trapped in a disturbed dream. How's that for a title? Cacophonous clanging. The clock of alarm in the morning. Waking in the morning. Wailing, it's morning. Warning, it's morning. Oh, I am mourning. Oh, I am longing for snoring and songing, for night, sleep, and belonging. Oh, I am snoring again.
Oh my God, that was good. Really funny.
How many of you write poetry? Any of you? You ever unsure of how good it is or isn't? Editing my children. How hard it is to choose among my children. The smart one, the tart one, the one with a touch of art one, to offer up some as a ruthless sacrifice to the knife of a callous surgeon, to urge on the operation, cold evisceration of their being, or to cast them, trash them into anonymity, to lash them, shun them as if I'd never begun them. Homeless poems, abandoned, verses stillborn from me, torn from me, now left with only sorrowful scorn for me. Poetry cannot always be better than we can make it be. Will this poem survive? Or undeserving, deserve to die?
Let it live.
Hardy culture. And by the way, if a word can be misspelled with a different meaning, consider that's the way it appears on the page. Okay, hardy culture. I am here not just to plant seeds of mind, but also to harvest the crop left behind by others who sowed and passed on their fields. Now, a time to harvest the yield. Now in the spring of our days, dance, sing, pick wildflower sprays, make bouquets of meaning, wrapped in mind's twine, to represent the maker's design. Now, any of you who have ever tried writing poetry have once in a while run into the most famous of all building blocks, mainly the writer's block. This is called hunger. Empty. I sat at the table. My mind puttered. My pen stuttered. The poem was hiding. Its wording butter. Frozen. Still. In the icebox of my mind, its syllables sliding between slices of rye, hiding behind the ham, hiding between the lemon juice and a bowl of cherries. Pushing all aside, I drew out the poem to savor. This recipe, this treat, was very, very, very sweet. Now, you will discover that this is a great place to be. This is the library. If you can't go to the library, you still want to hang out with a bunch of books, where do you go in this place, in this county? Barnes and Nobles. Barnes and Noble. The cognizant's ploy to while away the humdrum hours is to browse at bargains, books, and other browsers. On a Tuesday evening, with nothing else to do, I went to Barnes & Noble to become an adept too. Upon a tan divan, there sat a short, shriveled man with thinning hair and pointedly engaged in browsing too. He clutched a leather tome with a secure and practiced hand and sat there intently reading as if king of Nobleland. He stared with focused fervor at each leaf for at least a minute and seemed to laugh or have an insight for each gilt-edged page within it. I tried to browse the poetry shelves, but I couldn't keep my place. I kept reverting and averting eyes from rivets in his face. He turned another leaf. His face turned as chiseled as bas-relief. Whatever was upon the page was now frozen in his visage, and he grew wizened taut, as if he'd seen some hellish image. I sat down across from him. I feigned that I was skimming Yeats. I saw the wisdom pass to him, as if reading golden plates. The panoply of expression, intense in intonation, the morphic face of mental industry in graphic concentration. His eyes danced. My covert looks entranced by his emotion. Each new page, a new and novel grief. Novel as love potion. I had to know the contents of the book. I had to bide my time. By now an hour tersely passed, and it was near to 9. At last, the last page was stared at. He ate the skin. He ate the core. He rose. He put the book aside and shuffled out the door. I grabbed the book as if a thief. I reached for it with stealth. I coveted his treasure tome like all of Bill Gates' wealth. I opened the cover page, and it was blank. So naturally I turned again through that blank, bound, empty diary. And so I bought the book and often rifle through the empty pages and make believe I have a life that's brave and noble like the sages. I have a warning for you people. Caution. Be careful how you act around me. You might turn into a poem. Other poems. I mentioned that over the years I'd written over 1,000 poems. Divided into about 10 books, and then all of a sudden the poetry went away. That I opened with. But some of the poems are a little bit different. Other poems. The most beautiful poems I've ever heard contain not even a single word. A flattened red sun dying in the sparkling sun is unquestionably the very height of poetry. Or Zabriskie Point's kaleidoscope buttes, and the painted desert's monuments mute. The sonnet of a newborn fawn and mother, clinging in harmony one to the other. Or a virgin forest that runs for miles and miles, with snowmelt racing down hillsides and as the sun smiles. And how unreal the meter of rugged mountains seem. How mellifluous the gurgle of a tumbling stream. And oh, the rhythm of a cool spring rain. Oh, the whispers of wild grasses on an endless plain. Can you understand such a simple poem? Just look and listen, then go home. The Poet in the Kitchen. Did I mention that originally there were 10 books of poetry? It's been broken up into 10 books, of which this is just a mishmash from them. Okay, but this is The Poet in the Kitchen from a batch called Kitchen Wisdom. I am a poet in the kitchen with a limited vocabulary of ingredients. My taste for rhyme, sugar, and lemon rind, seasonings and spices, vegetables and vices. A grammar of knives and blenders and saucepans. I can vaguely taste the finished feast. At least, I know which words I will need to salt or season, and how much yeast. How many syllables of mirin? A comma between the peppers? Sometimes foul, with juices rendered, and how shall it all be presented? In couplets or free verse? Sweet and languid, or sour and terse? Meaty cuts and cutlets, all to be served by little black-tied English butlets. Kitchen wisdom. Don't ask me why the stove is jealous of the table, or what the light bulbs dream when they are dark at night, or what it is that the fridge is still forgetting when the milk goes in and the door is shutting tight. What secrets is the faucet dripping? What lies hiding in the drain? Why is the counter lonely Don't ask me to explain. One of the things that shaped my childhood was New York, both the wonderful experience of going to Queens College, which was the best free education there is, and at the same time, the opportunity to go to the to the planetarium every month, to go to the Museum of Natural History and the Metropolitan Museum of Art. They all had an influence on me as I grew up. I think a picture's about to happen here because, no, we don't have it. Okay. Excuse me a second. The Longest Love. You'll have to wait for it. If I were alive today, I think that I, Memi, would say, my wife, she has stood by me in death and life, and what feels like centuries, even longer. Our bond grows stronger since the day we posed and exposed our souls to the sculptor's eye. There we stand, her hand is placed around my waist, and my hand rests upon her breast. My hand, that rests upon her breast, still tingles in anticipation. Ah, her breast, that I used to caress and kiss and nibble, when the Nile whispered, and the frogs croaked, and the moon bathed us in the light of heaven. When the hops were in and the beer wasn't thin, Sabu would sing to me, in whispered reverence, songs of the love goddesses, the goddesses now forlorn, forgotten. They died with the coming of Islam and the Aswan. Damn! They was so sensuous. But yes, the only one I ever really knew was Sabu. The only one I ever really loved. For over 4,000 floods we have weathered all that gods and man can hurl at a simple couple, by love bound, now found in a Manhattan gallery, just hanging out together till eternity. Sabu and Memi. The Metropolitan Museum of Art is also another sculpture that has moved me widely in my history. The greatest cold I ever came upon was in a corner by Houdan. From dark marble depths it begins, shivers shake her from within. Nothing there to keep her warm, flimsy shawl clutching frozen form. Like a virgin urchin under wraps, feel the cold and chills that saps. Cold weather's beauty, hunches pride, freeze in my brain, my bones as I. When wintry winds assail, she rides my chairlift. We are so frail. When the heat fails, sub-zero night, she offers her ragged shawl to wrap me tight. I grew up in Lake Mayapack in my summers, and we had good times then. When I was 17, I sat between Barbara and Eileen on the back of a 409. She guided the black, shiny Chevy, exhaust throaty, engine heavy, down twisty Croton Falls Road. The wind mussed our hair, but never tickled a care. Bodies hard, days soft, top down, hats off. We conquered the heat, reflected off red leather seats, with coppertone and horn toots, with howls and with hoots, dressed in bikini swimsuits. Only modesty hid from the scene. Like puppies playing, we were pouring and gnawing on Corvettes and Chris Crafts, naive smiles and upper-class laughs. We knew just school and summer, clean towns and young wonder, a scratch for every itch. The times and the toys of the rich. Each day we would tool down the cool road to our pleasures and never measure the fact that down in the city there were children just like us, for whom no one would fuss. They had broken fire hydrants and drug addict migrants and rats for playmates and hatred for dates and futures as dark as their skin, and we never dreamed of our sin. This is a similar theme, but from a different perspective. House cleaning. The maid picks up the tired rag and rubs and scrubs hotel tubs, deporting dirt that immigrated from a lavish leg or arm to this hungry porcelain. She whittles away these hours, carves her initials on moments in the corners of boredom, moments that have no other meaning except a dream that cuts off the grime. A prince of the city on a golden chariot. Her hero ferries fancy fares to the posh hotel. He screams in silence at their privilege, looks at their clean, manicured nails, and sees them as dirt and maggots and lice who suck and feed on poor peasant people. Such scum does not deserve to ride in this honest hackney yellow cab. They leave behind the stench of wanton wealth. They don't deserve to have their rooms straightened and clean and made up by the princess of his dreams. Okay, a break from that tone. How many of you have ever heard of the poem called The Destruction of Sennacherib by George Gordon, Lord Byron, written in 1815, one of the great classics of poetry. The Assyrian came down like a wolf on the fold, and his cohorts were gleaming in purple and gold, as the sheen of their spears were like stars on the sea, with the blue wave rolls nightly on the deep Galilee, etc., 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 for 28 more lines. Now, there was a guy who influenced me in my childhood, which is still not ended, by the name of Ogden Nash. So Ogden Nash could not let him get away with this. So he began by writing Very Like a Whale, of which I will begin for you. One thing that literature would be better for would be a more restricted employment by authors of simile and metaphor. Authors of all races, be they Greeks, Romans, Teutons, or Celts, can't seem to just say anything that is the thing that it is, but have to go out of their way to say it is something else. What does it mean when we're told the Assyrian came down like a wolf on the fold? In the first place, George Gordon Byron had enough experience to know it probably wasn't just one Assyrian, it was a lot of Assyrians. And he goes on like this for 28 more lines. Should I leave him this way? No. Because we have to be wailing with a W-H and gnashing, for Ogden Nash with an N, wailing and gnashing of teeth. So I'm going to punish you now with this. There is a poem that must be writ, but the rhyme and meter I cannot get. My muse has left my call in Beck or is on vacation in Chapultepec. My hand is empty, I must go fish. But all the meters could be Spanish, or else it kind of sounds like Cockney. In a sanitarium, they'll soon lock me. A Hanukkah poem is what I seek, but the synthesis comes out like Greek. Blind rhyme to Oedipus Rex could go to get my muse back here from Mexico. Terse rhymes have flaws so fatal, letters spin like on a dreidel. Each draft blows out my little candle with more stresses than I could possibly imagine or you could possibly stand or I handle. There's no golden rhyme or ring to the oft-told tale of a serious king. Crumpled paper wolf's poetic lines so old, the tale comes down like purple prose on the fold. I suffer metaphobia diagnosis, similarly to like verbal halitosis. Each sick pun is meant to annoy and upset. I drink the draught in the poisoned couplet. The words don't run, they barely hobble. And the accent is on the wrong syllable. My light bulb's dark. I can but dumbly bore on. If I keep goring, my oxymoron. I thought some light poetry in there wouldn't hurt. Speedster, he was running so fast he got ahead of himself. Now where is his shadow going to go? Okay, read. There is a droplet on the table. It will plop. There's a droplet on the faucet that is hanging. It will plop when the world is unawares. Chaos lies in wait till it comes banging. There are no rules. It is never fair. So belly up to the bar or the table to seek denial or to play the game. Free choice is just a useless fable. The final roll comes out the same. I guess among the later poems that I wrote was a to-do list. When I say later poems, in 2011. Haven't written much since then. I shall not live in callousness, in blind, uncaring haste. I shall live in openness to every sight and smell and taste. I shall not make today like yesterday. I shall not walk in sorrow. I shall take each walk in happiness and do it again tomorrow. You have to go out on a poem, but which I'm not going to. It's not a bad one. Afghan. The Afghan spread, rocked by the chair, and withered legs below, crafted as one never finds in a store, just in grandmother's memories. The weathered fingers still fly as the needle loops and hooks, loops and hooks, loops and hooks, like a metronome, crocheting the moments of a life. The return. I think I can hear death in the unmoving curtains as the dusk gathers. Curtains no longer cleaned by the frail, diligent hands moved by habit. The mattress unfolds and shapes itself to her old and spent body. And the grandfather clock tolls slower and louder in the mode of sunlight. Dust particles just hang suspended, waiting. Cleansing. Before I get to cleansing, how many of you saw the Leonid meteor shower that came through in December this year? For many years. Well, way back in '03, it came through beautifully, and during the summer, and I spent the better part of the night in a beach chair in the backyard in Hyde Park at the time, just watching this streaking across the sky. Cleansing. I will not wallow in your soulless world, awash in post-modernity, for I have showered in the Leonids and lathered with eternity. Some people like short poems. This one is not too long. Clueless. If God is perfect in his plan, it is clear to me that man does not understand. Judgment. Sometimes types of judgment depend on where you are in time and whether you're still in the work world, etc. Judgment. Can you imagine the paralysis, the heart-breaking, soul-breaking fear of a pilgrim or a journeyman beckoned before a distant king, enthroned, entitled, empowered, to cast you into the tower at the snap of an idiosyncrasy, with the noble insouciance, the arrogance of aristocracy, or the insistent invitation to have a little conversation at Vondezinski Square when the KGB was there. Shall we see the doctor, the final solution in Mengele's lie, or the time to take a little shower, Arbeit nach frei. I look out upon the harbor. Is it time to end or to begin? In this corporate Boston tower, the boss has beckoned me in. Last Christmas, actually it's 20 years ago, Santa sold his GPS and shed his reindeer sled to the joy of the EPA. He thinks it's time to put toys online on a site much like eBay. His cookies are kosher and approved by OSHA for a virtual Christmas day. Another year, another Yule, log on the website. See what Santa downloads on FedXmas night. There'll be e-toys and plenty of them in the new millennium. I cannot write poems. They come out strained and tortured. But sometimes a poem comes and seizes me from within until I let it out. O pun sesame. No pun here, right? O pun sesame. Over time, my use of puns has grown. Ever more puns. And you see, I had to lighten this up a little bit, right? Unlike the raven of the poet Poe, my puns are like those of the crows. They heckle and jekyll and hide within. After beginnings, before begins. Double meanings and double entendres equals formidable fun. The mind ponders. I live to play with words inside, killing logic with a wild sleigh ride. Now, I will place where my poems belong in terms of quality. A stop in the wood on a frosty night. Whose wood is it? I know, I think. But bad mutes make this bad verse stink. My little horse who dragged this cart must be perturbed by my mute art. Unkept promise of verses free before my rest, more miles for me. In dark and deep wood I am lost. Can't rhyme my poems like Robert Frost. All right, the worth of words in verse. The poems are too much with us. Late and soon. Anybody know where that's from? The word. Who?
Milton, wasn't it?
Wordsworth.
Oh, Wordsworth?
Yeah. Yeah.
The
worth of words in verse. The poems are too much with us, late and soon, getting and spending, ending, beginning, pending, soon, some are better, others worse. I ask of thee in verse, what are Wordsworth? Okay. This is, of course, iambic pentameter. There is the bard, Shakespeare. This is downstream from the master, I am. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Where did I get that line from? Shall I compare thee to a summer's day, O Avon stream that flows so long and sweet? A summer will that just won't fade away. So take a walk with true iambic feet. We stroll along sublime soliloquies, our Hamlets strut and fret on many stages. Legacy of Rome's antiquity, our Antonies will seize the day courageous. I am so tempest-tossed, love labors lost. It's not a winter's tale or Cymbeline. To do the bard is worse than thawing frost. I'm a drowning in a sonnet stream. When I will write Shakespeare a praising sonnet, I cannot always rhyme it as I want it. Okay, we're now a little coming to the season. Because after the chorus of geese has faded, and the sigh of streaking the Leonids has passed, after the leaves have blown and fallen, and the first hard frost coats the grass, I bring my cement Buddha inside, so that he may winter in my home, and meditate on the sequence of seasons, the past, the present, the known, the unknown. Speaking of bringing my cement Buddha inside, was a beautiful day, very reminiscent of my this day of the year, I reminisce of this kind of weather, visiting my mother in Florida. But not up here. Wonderful, wasn't it? But nevertheless, it is fall. Mouse. It is fall, and it is folly. Again, I have a visitor. Uninvited, unannounced, my annual harbinger. I found droppings on my cutting board this morning. He comes through the wall following the path of his ancestors last fall. And I pity not only his plight, but his lack of insight in his choice of shelter. For though we must share his earth, this one and all his kin cannot share my kitchen. This one written at the time of the Jewish holiday of Rosh Hashanah, the New Year. Encyclical fall. Encyclical, 2 words. It is the fall. The poison ivy climbing my willow withers into autumn colors. Election day draws near. Talk shows squawk shriller than territorial squirrels arguing over nests and nuts. And days grow even shorter. Halloween hovers on the horizon. Our trick-or-treat polity weaves stories of ghosts for votes, and trigger-happy tipsy hunters amid midnight aggressive blunders play staccato shotgun notes. It is cyclical. After the fall, the gods are quiet. The devil hums. Winter comes. Well, we're up to Thanksgiving. We're working our way through the year with some of these poems. Pilgrim's Progress. I mean, what else would you do for Thanksgiving is have Pilgrim's Progress, right? Well, it's the time for toils to cease and join the automotive geese flocking home. Expressways jammed with travelers, we're not alone. We trek, we talk across New York, across New England to Portland, Maine, in relentless rain, across dull tan terrain, past Thoreau's Walden Pond, beyond the Lawrence scenes of frost, now mostly lost to progress, and to the explosion of the plain sameness of New England's new urban sprawl. Yet all we see on this is this journey to the past, to the last bastion of tradition, the scents and smells of the founding family kitchen. Homecoming for Thanksgiving, to memories and to families, interspersed with some turkey demanding attention, holding sway as the women at the cooking, looking like they work together every day. Must prepare it just the family way. The sacred recipe, the banter, oranges, ginger, spices, sausage. Mushrooms quartered, it's okay. Vintage Henkels, women juggling 25 pounds of turkey under the weight of a decanter and a half of wine. Laughing, giggling, rebonding all the time. Rain sheeting, beating on a window, irrelevant in the dark, for tonight the spark, the glow, the verbal flow is the sedate debate about chestnuts, sour cream, squash, and stuffing, the late taste traditions lubricated by red Shiraz, jazz, and all the love a family has. So we're up to December. December's sun. And picture a day like today when this was written, but it was rare then. I open my sunroof. It is December. The sun stares into my car. It searches to spaces around the seats, seeking the remaining chill of fall. It heats the interior with flashy, incongruous promises. It glares in denial of its daily declining arc across the blaze of azure sky. Yet it plants its seed, the reason why I am thankful for each moment. This was written in February of '01. And how many of you ever drive Route 9G up towards Rhinebeck? You know where Burger Hill is on the left? I was driving past Burger Hill on my way up to Hunter one night to my ski house at the time in the cold of winter. And the wind is blowing and the bare branches are clattering above the head of my... But I've got the sunroof open because the sky's starlit night and the branches, and it's cold and it's windy, and there's Burger Hill on the left. Snowy regrets. In the days of deciduous death, mountain rainbows turn to brown, when the winds of November remember and groundhogs take to ground, when the night wakes from summer slumbers, from the attic the cold seeps down. Then the scythe of the frost cuts across the gold hair of the hills till bald. Frigid nights of December dismember, leave no ember for us of the fall. Cast in it branches, tree skeleton dances. The world of men dies again after all. And you drink strong cheer for denial, cavort by a sprue sacrificial, pretend at year-end your agenda of hope and holly and Christmas will turn the tide and the trend, not send hoary death threats at will. Red. The rosy-fingered dawn appeared. By the way, you might notice some references to other poetry here. The rosy-fingered dawn appeared, churning white-cap sparked with red. As I blunder on my journey drifting, was it something that I did or said? The red dress glides into the room, red lips full of promises, lively shape. Redolent of roses, and I like a bull, charge the red matador's red cape. The rosy-breasted woman, Beatrice, is her name, I read. Ever calling, ever out of reach? Was it something that I did or said? Red are my eyes from crying, blood red my fevered refrain. Fiery red are the halls of hell. So why am I back here again? Next is called Not Poetry. Maybe it is not all poetry. The broken bones, the flat tires, the torn ligaments of our hopes, and the cacophonies and sophistries of our denial. Maybe this type of prose that stutters over how it goes seeks meaning in screams where there used to be dreams, and hope didn't hobble at dinner, where the hubris of a kiss was the top of a list of our reasons for living. When our house was in order, when tears didn't water, growing lessons that aren't forgiving. Maybe it does rain and pour on the Monday of our only vacation, when gray skies and chill leave the heart very still, and all the rewards get muddy. Stop smiling. Drop the charade, you know? Dealt lemons, make lemonade. Make lemonade? Cliches don't make the grade. When the heavens cry, cry with them. Pipe dreams. The ashes of my childhood are in the urn on the mantle of the fireplace of my heart. Within the flames abate, but the coals grow still smolder as I grow older and sit back on cozy cushions of reminiscence and carefully crafted memories of stories and fantasies as needs to warm the cooler nights of the oncoming winter. Stormy days. Just because there's a storm upon your seas, you need not throw me overboard into the maelstrom, the howling surf to be eaten by sharks, leaving only bones on the bottom that fishes will hide in. Every storm blows over, and then rainbows blossom over waves brought to life by benign breezes. There'll be time to set sail again on that voyage to the horizon. I know I'm not perfect. I know that you're not either. I'm sorry, I know neither are you. But remember, we are special, and special ones are few. You may batten down your hatches, but as you are pitched and tossed, remember in your seasickness that some friends aren't lost. No voyage is forever, all journeys come to an end. All you can ask of the gods that be is to travel with a friend. This one, about 14 years, written 14 years ago roughly, and apparently around the time of Yom Kippur, the Jewish time of atonement. DreamWorks. Maybe it's when I started realizing that my poetry was going away. I don't know. DreamWorks. Inside, the cleaning staff is straightening up. They are quietly working behind the scenes, puttering and putting away, sorting, storing my dreams, the reshaped and rescued themes of my existence. The nurse comes to medicate my fears wandering about from 58 years, filled and unfulfilled, with daily experience, with life itself, with pain perceived, and with death to come, and end this one. There is, I guess, among the mess, a librarian reshelving the misplaced moments, catalog the careening casualties of absurdity, profundity, and indigestion. There are no LCC numbers, no Dewey Code that can unravel where she shelves them. No payment, no ransom can buy the free association with which she intuitively sorts scenarios and goes about shuffling and reshuffling the shelves of memory. When I return home to my conscious life, I barely see how my abode has been rearranged. But I can sense that something has been changed. Something is somehow different. Isn't it? The way. Anybody have any of you been up to the Zen monastery in Ulster County? Great place. Do you know the way? The way at the Zen monastery across the road. It exists between thin trees winding into woods, into the infinity of a limitless palette, fall colors, pinwheel leaves, sun-spackled, dancing, glittering, heading toward the light. The path beckons. I beg to see the Roshi. May I walk in the path? May I walk the path? He asks if I seek instruction. No, I reply. I merely wish permission to walk his path. He replies, let us walk it together. Parsifal, a pilgrim to nowhere. The road doesn't matter. There's no progress. Who the Grail serves is of no concern, for the castle is closed to the lost hearts. I seek my name on a black wall in my own life. I am missing in action. Even as you say you know me, I know that I am a stranger lost to myself. I am not on a journey. I'm just shuffling around my own attic, and I don't know what I found. This is now, in fact, we are coming in on the end of the year. And this is a dark poem. This was written in 11 around Christmas. Dark poem. That sounds appropriate, doesn't it? I write dark poems at the end of the year as the sun sinks low in my soul. Tell me, please tell me I have nothing to fear, even as I grow old. The solstice signals turning. The sun is barely burning. The sun shivers ever more cold, even as I grow old. The water that runs lies still in its course. The year is gone, the days are lost. People weep and pray. Bells are tolled, even as I grow old. Nights are longer, daylight flees, the trees deserted by their leaves. When spring will come forth from its mold, even as I grow cold. That's actually a Christmas poem. It was written on Christmas. Exactly 10 years, was it? Exactly 10 years ago. The Blind Timekeeper. I guess this is what happens as you get older and you have to ask what happens. I guess, you know, I bet you that most of you here are over 21. But maybe this is relevant. The Blind Timekeeper. Why do you wonder, my wandering soul, why microbes are born, or what's a black hole? Why birds in fine feather and fish in fine fin find Darwin's playground, the place to begin? Where is it going? How will it end? Must I go there alone? Can I go with a friend? Unwanted caller. When death made its call, I hung up. Death called again. I said, take me off your list. He said, I insist. Our working lives, this is called seasons. Our working lives are like Adirondack lakes, full of busy boats, tourists, sightseers, a few residents. Camps need upkeep, painting, docks always need repair. There are windy days, sunny days, rainy days. It's best to know the season's ways. Some years a thick coating of colors, red, gold, and shades untold of leaves float on the surface tension. Not to mention the hard times when all is frozen solid as land and stolid deer on tiptoe stand on the lake and trim all evergreens within their extended reach. Each alone with courage faces the shortage of food for forage. And when the lake is renewed with rains and the regeneration of a new cycle's abundance, workdays can be as bedeviling as the ants and the black flies that come like the IRS in the spring. As the sun begins to set on this our magic pond, we look to nourished lovers and friends to help us on the portage to a calmer lake beyond. Now, I had mentioned that I had been educated at Queens College in the great days of open enrollment, and we were kind to take a poetry course. And that was one of the best things that happened to me, along with the other literature that we were forcibly exposed to, including reading Don Quixote in the original Spanish, as well as the Inca Book of the Dead in the original Spanish translation from the Inca, to most of the great drama, including a good bit of Shakespeare, and of course some of the other great poetry, such as Coleridge's Rime of the Ancient Mariner, etc. Somewhere along the line, we came from there to the story of the fisher in the storm. I'm not sure how or why, written about 10 years ago, again. But I had the honor, I guess you would say, to read for some people at the time at the Duke Farms National Poetry Festival for a small group, the following poem that I have written, along with poems, other poems, but that was mainly this longer piece. And at the same time, there was a man who was just tremendous, Benjamin Bagby, who has set to music, probably close to the original, as well as Bagby's reading of the Beowulf in the original. This is not in the original, but inspired by the idea around the Beowulf. The Fisher in the Storm. Harold hovered off the Irish coast, where the cold sea seeks its dew, where men have died, where women cried for lost ships and their crew. He cast his net upon the right. It filled to full so fast. The teeming life swarmed into it, vast catches unsurpassed. Harold folded fishing nets, the time to true the scales. He fished fine waters for his life, and he had heard hard tales. Soon as the sun sunk in the sea, beneath the ring rung round the moon, came the racing, pacing clouds, death-deep shadow shapes of doom. Birds bid the boat a brisk farewell and set off to find some lee. Some they say that evil swims this way. It stalks the shamrock sea. The mist mulled in to seize his sight. Silent sounds the sea. The smell, the stench of stinking stuff. The dead, the dying, the debris. The wind awoke and willed the world to rise with rancor. Like a horn, hail high the herald. Hell will hunt small Harold to the dawn. The rains came running across the waves, waving shawls of watery wrath. She demons in sheer shredded shrouds, bent to swamp all in their path. The sea, the sea, the surging sea. No stopping where it goes. The sea, the sea, the surging sea. The most anonymous of foes. Harold strove with the storm that night, failed to find a place to flee. The waves they crashed, the waters lashed. The twisted tide was tumbling free. Each muscle stiff, he stroked his skiff to face those towers tall, as if all the world would wound him if he let up at all. The storm surged south. Its maw, its mouth did roar and rear and roar and rant and rave. It looked small Harold in his heart and wished him to his grave. Lightning lurched its lurid lines, the devil's glare glowed in the sky. Few are the men that dare to stare right in that irate eye. Harold, with his haggard oar, with his limping rudder strained amid spray and fury of the storm, maintained by God, maintained. At dawn the downpour ceased, the wind dropped down to nil. Harold, holding hard his oar, was sitting so still. Harold, in a huddled heap, tried and tired to the core. The sky above, the ocean deep. His clawed hand still clenched the oar. The rollers rolled, the noon bells tolled. He drifted inland with the tide. They tried to pry his fingers free, but his hand would not abide. He stared at the sky, soothed by the sun. They laid him in loose sand. He swore to stay ashore. He knelt. He kissed the land. Soon, so soon, he'll set to sea. Call these wily waters friend. Cast his nets and seek his life till the great storms come again. Thank you all very much.
This first piece is a remembrance that I had some 60 years ago. When I was still down south, I was asked to go hunting with a friend of mine, and we were both into using bows and arrows. And I had taken some classes in it and had gone into some exercises of how to set up your shooting, to know in the woods what and where to look that gave you the best chance. This particular piece ended my idea of hunting, and I've never hunted since. It's entitled A Dearest Image. That 1960s morning, early and bleak, I was heading to hunt deer for a first time with my friend that week. Bow and arrow were my means of kill, but I questioned, did I have the needed hunting skill? Quietly walking on lake's edge, my friend on opposite side, we listened sharply to nature's sounds that had no intent to hide. Step by step, as I moved ahead, a concurrent hissing sound was heard. As I looked down in total dread, this might be me in the future dead. A water moccasin coiled by my foot in fear. A strong threat to strike, a scary thing to see, that increasing darkened light. Freeze I did for a moment in frame, then drew my bow and shot the moccasin with no intended shame. As seconds raced by, I leaped aside, avoiding the poisonous bite, and had killed my first prey of the day that unwelcomed a new height. Dumbfounded and empty, I walked on in a moment of strife, then realized I was here to take another life. The woods I angled into, looking all around. Then only 20 feet ahead, behind a bush of light foliage, was the image finally found. A doe it was, standing and looking inquisitively at me. No fear here, as she stayed on to see. I stood and watched. Several minutes passed, realizing that this beauty I could not kill had to last. Being a vital part of our world from dusk to dawn, she had every right, I thought, to live her life with family and fawn. I never hunted again since those 55 years ago, and still relish seeing these images of life's beauty on landscapes, summer and snow, present and past, for as long as I last. That's that. Now this next piece is, in a sense of storyline, and it's entitled My Ghost Friend. I lost a dear friend back in 2016 under questionable circumstances. It was a devastating experience that continues to this 2017th day. I think of Andy and the good times we had those high school years, and will never forget them. I constantly ask myself, why and how did this happen? To date, there have been no concrete answers. I was going through my 2016 high school yearbook and came across Andy's photo, bringing back that series of strange, unexplainable circumstances that I think of each and every month. Going into the start of our senior year, we were walking home one night from a movie theater, having seen the horror film Running Scared. All of a sudden, Andy points in a direction and screamed, "What the hell is that?" I don't see anything, but Andy says, there was something hovering above ground. I have no idea what it was. We made it home that night, but I never saw Andy again. The next morning, Andy's parents told police when he had gotten home, he had gone upstairs. That was the last time they saw him. The police searched the neighborhood for several days. They found nothing. Missing person photos were distributed throughout the town. Nothing again. The anniversary of Andy's disappearance is tomorrow. I always will relive what happened, but it doesn't seem to help. I watched a little TV with Mom and Dad, said goodnight, and went up to bed. Just before getting in bed, I said to myself, maybe Andy would want me to move on. Lying in bed, I pushed myself to think of a positive mind frame to help me drift to sleep. For some reason, I started thinking back when Andy and I used to girl talk in regard to dating and who it would be for each of us. It seemed to work because when I awoke and checked my bedside clock, it was a little after 3 a.m. in the morning. I then heard some kind of unfamiliar sound and figured maybe a similar sound had awakened me. It was strange. What the heck was it, and where was it coming from? My second floor window was open, and there seemed to be some kind of movement in the tree outside. I got out of bed, softly walked over to look out. At first I saw nothing, but then there was a figure huddled in the fork of the tree trunk. I could not believe what I saw being illuminated from our front door porch light. The grayed, hazy, ghost-like image resembled Andy that past year. I opened the window further as this image of Andy literally floated over to me, then hesitated a few feet away. With what just happened, I was dumbfounded and couldn't say a word. Andy's soft voice then said, "I heard your outreaching thoughts about moving on and had to tell you I lovingly support your decision and apologize for not touching base sooner. Have a good life." And then he was gone. Was this entire happening a dream? I don't have a solid answer, but that next morning I went back to the window to check out what I had seen and found stuck outside the screened frame an old movie theater ticket for Running Scared, the movie we went to that last night I ever saw Andy. Still living with my parents this year after high school, I did agree with Andy it was time to move out, get a good job, and seriously consider following my dream of studying creative writing. Thanks, Andy, my ghost friend forever. This last piece actually was just, let's find out where I am writing here. It was one that I actually finished just today. It's relatively short. It's entitled "Artistic Wonder is Here." Performance of feelings allows creative expression from us to them. These ongoing, uplifting moments throughout history have given man, womankind directions of positive growth to this day and time, and hopefully our questioned future. The varied arts across our world continue our acceptance of these talents and spur further the future generations to continue and broaden the fields open to all. Open-endedness of each and every art form will expand continuously, including writings, visual arts, performances, and advancing technology applications creating their own fields of artistic wonder. Where this goes depends openly on all of us, not only on artistic paths we take, but also on the recognition of artistic delivery. Viewing at galleries, attending performances, reading and absorbing writings and their readings, walking streets and viewing the beautiful murals we have been given. On these wonderful pathways of expansive life we'll go. There is artistry everywhere. We have to be open to receive its wonder and grow from life's beauty of advancement. Just in closing, let me mention to you that I was a realistic painter for like some 60 years. I studied up in Provincetown with the painter Henry Henchy, and he was well known to actually teach the Impressionist methodology of painting. What I learned up there was absolutely stunning. One of the winters I studied with William Draper down at the Art Students League and took a portrait figure class there. And that was my real focus in painting, was always trying to capture the human spirit. But when I studied with Henry, it was the ideology of looking and understanding how the light of the day changed from morning, midday to late afternoon to early evening. And that in itself could so create and help the viewer of the works get into that feeling of the personal entity of the subject at that particular time in its life, in her life, whatever life that might be. And I've written all my life. When I was in junior high school, we had writing classes that I loved. And I remembered when I was, I think, 5 years old in Memphis, there was I'm trying to think of a P-51 Mustang, which was a fighter pilot back in those days, would fly over, and I would look up and see this plane fly over. We had an Air Force just outside of Memphis, where a lot of the fighter pilots were trained to be sent overseas, and this was toward the end, probably maybe the end of the Second World War in 45. And I would always say to myself, what would it be like to fly and see the sky up that high, you know? And all of a sudden, that kind of in my head rhymed, and it caught something in me, and I jotted it down. And I've been interested in writing little things about my thoughts, about some rhyme, and very seldom do I ever go into the actual forms that so many poets have written over this centuries, literally, you know, from Aristotle all the way through up to Edgar Allan Poe to nowadays, whatever. And I've always enjoyed, and I just tell myself, you know, you're a free verse type of guy. And that's kind of where I am. But thank you so much for putting up with me.